This is the Dover Download Podcast. My name is Christopher Parker, and for the past 25 years, I've had the pleasure of working with, learning from, and talking to a variety of volunteer, staff, and community members. This podcast explores conversations, activities, and a variety of policies and programs which exist here in Dover to improve the community in one way or another.
New Hampshire has a very limited construction season, and you can always tell when we're in it because there's vehicles and construction equipment everywhere. Welcome, Ken Mavrogeorge and Jill Semprini from the city's Community Services Department to tell us about those construction vehicles and equipment throughout the city. How are you two?
Good, Chris. Thanks for having us.
Doing well. Thank you, Chris.
So we have a policy here of trying to take care of our infrastructure. And through the capital improvements program, which the staff puts together in the summer, the manager evaluates in the fall, and then the council and the planning board review in the late fall, early winter. We identify projects we need to do, and we identify funding mechanisms for those projects. And then everything sort of gets dumped in your laps to say, okay, now we got to get those done. Can you tell us about some of those now we got to get those done that maybe are ongoing right now as we look to the construction season?
There's a number of those projects that over time we try to figure out in the engineering side what the best projects are, what the highest priority, what the worst of the worst, you would say, what the worst water system, water main, sewer main, et cetera. We've done a number of studies to look at the paving conditions. We've looked at sidewalk conditions, and that helps us prioritize, but it may not be what the council wants to prioritize. So last fall, we saw that the council took a different opinion and wanted to go and prioritize Horn Street reconstruction. So that's a project that the council and city staff were able to find additional funding to prioritize that and move that up in the CIP. So we're working towards getting an RFP out the door, which is a request for proposals for design for Horn Street reconstruction.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And we're talking today mostly about projects that are underway, but I like that you're raising the point, maybe unintentionally, that nothing just happens. There has to be a design phase. There has to be an engineering study for it. It's not like we just go out one morning and say, okay, we're going to rip up Horn Street today and put down new blacktop and some lane striping and call it a day. And Jill, what sort of timelines do you usually anticipate with design? I know it varies on the size and scope of the project, but I assume that a project like Horn Street, it is a 8 to 10 month design. It's not if you can even find someone, but if it's not let's start it on July 1st and then August 1st, we have a plan.
Yeah, that's right. First, we have to obviously put out an RFP to select the consultant. So that takes, a month or two, and then getting the consultant on board. The first step would be public meeting to capture what the public wants on that road, and specifically, travel lanes, bike lanes, sidewalks, etc. And then after that, they'll go through the preliminary design. We'll probably have another public meeting, go through final design. So it takes about 10 to 12 months, I would say, until we're ready to go out to construction.
I know just from my walk in this morning that the Central Avenue Water Main project is underway. Mm-hmm. How's that going?
It's going really well. I think in considering the scope, the scale, the impact of the neighborhood, the businesses downtown, it's going about as well as we can expect. Obviously, a few years ago, we did the Upper Central in front of the hospital and in front of the shopping centers. And obviously, it does create some disruption during that time period with trenching and the roads conditions not all that great, but it's a necessary evil. I always say it's replacing water infrastructure that's 150 years old. If we don't do it, the risks associated with that are far greater than the temporary disruptions.
As longtime employee Bill Belanger used to say, it's better to take the time to rip it up and replace it than to worry about the break.
Correct.
He would always point to a water main break from like 1980 around First and Central that I think wiped out most of downtown from a water standpoint for months.
It was how I was introduced as my first week on the job with the city 4 years ago. He dropped a pile of pictures on my desk of Central Ave opening up in the early 90s to really stress and drive home the point that what we're doing is to prevent things like that from happening.
We got the Central Avenue Water Main project, which is really, as you say, a component. We did the upper. We did, before both of you were on board, we did the Washington and Maine connection points. Now we're focusing on Central. This project starts at Abbey Sawyer and heads south to the railroad tracks.
Yep.
Not that we're going in that order, but that's the scope. And then coming up, we have a project that connects from there and continues southward, correct? Not immediately, but...
Correct. Right. In the CIP, we've put in for the next phase, which would be from Broadway down to Washington. And then eventually there'll be another phase from Washington down to Silver. Lower Central project is going to be coming up later this fall. It'll be going out to bid. We're working through the design plans with the DOT there. That's the next phase of that water. So we're trying to do it in sections and trying to incorporate it with street reconstructions where we can.
So Jill, when we do street reconstructions, if the design takes 10 to 12 months, implementation must follow at a scale and scope similar, right?
Construction usually takes about 18 months to 2 years to do, because you got to do the utilities first, and then once those are in, then comes the roadway reconstruction part. So it could take 18 months to 2 years.
In years past, we talked about doing complete streets, and we talked about doing it from two phases. One is if you're going to do the top of the exposed part of the street, you should do the undercarriage, the utilities, the below grade, so that you don't have to come back later and fix that. But then we've also used maybe the more conventional use of that term to talk about, let's look at pedestrian infrastructure, bicycle infrastructure, certainly vehicular infrastructure. Is that ongoing? Is that pretty commonplace still, that we still look at those features when we're doing these road reconstructions?
Yeah, I think one thing to keep in mind is that we know that the city is old. The city just celebrated its 400th anniversary, 400th birthday. There's a lot of streets that haven't seen a new coat of pavement in many years, some upwards of 60 years or more. We're trying to take a different approach in engineering and in community services, and trying to keep the good roads good and trying to improve the worst of the worst is best we can. That may mean that we steer a little bit off that path of trying to do the utilities and the pavement all at once, because we recognize that not all these projects are going to get into the CIP. A CIP reconstruction project is a very large undertaking, and we're seeing costs continually go up and up and up. For instance, Court Street is roughly a mile-long reconstruction, and it's nearly $10 million for that section of road. The waterfront obviously is a large project, and that's from ground up. There was nothing there. These projects are getting more and more expensive, so we have to take a different approach. So what you're going to see this summer is you're going to see a lot of paving projects. We may, in fact, start doing some reclaim work to bring some of those older roads up to a higher standard, recognizing that there is some underlying utility work that has to occur down the road. As for complete streets, bike lanes, we're trying to incorporate sharrows, shared bike signage, and bike lanes where we can on these reconstructions, but also tying it to our paving list. So when we pave a road, we have a blank slate for to say, and we can put those bike lanes, we can put those sharrows and encourage the more complete streets.
Can I just add to that? When we do our reconstruction projects, part of the public meetings is getting feedback on what the public wants to see on that road, so that, we can be informed if they want sidewalks, parking, bike lanes, sharrows, that kind of thing. So the first public meeting is really important to that. And on the 5th and Grove Street project and on Court Street, we actually put out polls, public polls, that the residents of Dover could submit input on what they wanted to see on those roads. And even on the Lower Central project, we just had a public meeting, and some of the feedback from that meeting we're now incorporating into the project as well. Having
been through a number of those public meetings, I'm always struck by, at the initial one, in some ways it's hopes and dreams. And then you have to come back and say, okay, here's how those hopes and dreams actually reality-wise impact your neighborhood. And I can think of numerous where we've heard, we want bike lanes, we want this. And then when you say, okay, given the reality of your tight right-of-way, that means you're going to lose on-street parking. And then all of a sudden, sharrows are okay because people realize there's trade-offs. And I think it's always struck me as one of our strengths as a staff is not saying, well, we're the technical experts and you don't want what you think you want, but walking them through and helping educate people about impacts of what they say they want, so they can, whether it's visual or narrative, see that something that sounds great might not be in reality is exactly how it sounds. Unlike the three of us. We sound great and we are great.
And I think that's a really good point. And to build on what Jill just said on 5th and Grove, for example, when we put out the poll, we were asking, do you want to have parking on both sides of the road, sidewalks on both sides of the road, which came back as very positive, received high marks. Unfortunately, that really doesn't allow us to have two-way travel. So during that process, we decided that, it would be better to have one-way travel from Chestnut to Grove and from Grove down to 4th on 5th Street, primarily because it improved the safety of it removed the left turn out of 5th Street onto Chestnut, but also allowed us to have more parking. I think we gained somewhere around 8 to 10 parking spaces in that entire project area, specifically because we did that. We had to listen to the constituents to understand what was going to be worked out.
And the trade-off is they could say, you know what, it's worth me having to go an extra block in one direction to turn around because I'm getting what I wanted over here.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I always find interesting with those meetings is when you identify who's a resident of the neighborhood or the impacted area versus who is a resident of the community. And then even sometimes we've had people that are driving through an area, commuters, as it were, on some of the Central Avenue projects, because Central Avenue certainly acts as a commuter route, and you get different perspectives. And I think all are valid. We just have to weight them a little differently when we're saying, here's the impacts and here's what we can tolerate.
Sure. And I think one of the most common questions I see and I hear, I'll go to family events and friends and family will go, hey, I got a question for you about this project. And is it true that this is going to happen? And I think a lot of people see roundabouts and traffic circles and they wonder, why are there so many, or why do we seem to be migrating towards that as a means of getting people through an intersection? And once we start conveying and talking about the message of how you're reducing contact points or conflict points and improve pedestrian safety, it really can shine and sort of open their eyes and go, okay, so you're saying I won't have to wait at a traffic signal and go through a cycle or worry about the traffic signal breaking down and then having to take everything into my own hands. So it's really being effective communicators to try to explain that.
I also add in when we talk about roundabouts that there might be a slightly higher install cost, but the operations cost is a lot lower.
Yeah,
it's almost nil.
Absolutely.
That if you want your tax dollars to go further, spend more on.
Correct.
It's the same at home, right? You can buy one grade of clothing and it'll last you X amount of time. But if you spend a little bit more on a higher quality piece of clothing, it'll last you a lot longer. I learned that with shoes years ago.
Absolutely.
Jill, a major project, which is only 25 years in the making, is Henry Law Avenue reconstruction, Payne Street reconstruction. What's going on there?
That's a great question. So we recently awarded the contract to Northeast Earth, who is our contractor for the waterfront. They will be starting construction hopefully by, the end of the summer. And that will be a 2-year project in the making. So yeah, we're really excited.
And that project, I call it the Henry Law Avenue reconstruction, but it's so much more than that. There's the stormwater management piece. There's some cosmetic improvements to the park itself. Big part is the underground utility component, which I know we're still trying to figure out how we're going to finance. And then finishing Payne Street as well, which the waterfront started and got halfway through, but we recognize a break point. I think when that project is done, which probably will coincide with the Central Avenue Washington Street water line in a lot of ways because of the 2-year time frame. Yeah. I think people will be able to take a strong breath of fresh air that downtown is done for now.
Yeah, and I think what you're starting to see is momentum down there, right? You're seeing the waterfront starting to look green, and you see the beautiful trees and landscaping, and paved patios are being installed, seemingly every day. It's something that's growing and growing. The next phase of this is that Henry Law. So it's putting in stormwater. So we're going to see an added benefit. While the public may not see that at the end of the day, we'll know it's there, and we'll have to communicate the message as to why that's occurring. New sidewalks always draw attention, new paved surfaces. There'll be a small roundabout there to allow for bidirectional travel. But it really sets the tone for the next phase of that, which would be redevelopment of McGlarris Park and the dredge cell closure and all of the things we've recently brought to the city council and talked about that's just really going to help bring more, vibrancy to that downtown.
I know in the past we've done project pages and we try to update the webpage. Are there project pages for these various projects? Can people get on listservs or whatever they're called now to keep up to date on information?
There's a project webpage for the Henry Law project. We probably need to update it now. There's a project webpage for the Lower Central Ave project. There's one for the urban core with the water main that's being replaced right now. So yes, we try to make specific web pages for each project.
And that's just go to the city of Dover at www.dover.nh.gov. And is it on the homepage? Is there a link to the project pages, or how do you find those project pages?
Sure. So up at the top of the right-hand side of the webpage, there should be a link that says contact us or get more information for the Dover download. There's links on that page that allows you to sign up for specific projects or specifically for the Dover download which usually comes out on Fridays with a lot of project updates.
As we wrap up, we are looking at current projects that are wrapping up and ones that are going to start. Long term, we mentioned the Horn Street project, which is in its design phase. The Broadway project is another one that comes to mind in the design phase. Is that a project that is still hanging out there, or where are we in general with the Broadway? Because that for a while was a huge project, and it had a lot of if-thens in it.
Sure.
The drainage under the railroad complete and things of that nature.
Yeah, so that one is one that the last couple of years we've been putting in and advocating for in the CIP. We have a substantial amount of money and funding ready allocated for it. And we've been working with engineers on conceptual designs for drainage throughout the entire area, which is quite large. The project would be broken up into anywhere from 8 to 10 different phases. We have a proposal in hand for phase 1 and 2 and partway through 2. Our hope is to start design very, very soon so we can start seeing shovels in the ground within the next year or so.
We've talked a lot about bigger projects, Henry Law, Central Avenue, the water main, but there are a couple of smaller projects that I know. One was recently completed. 2 more are in design phase and coming up. And I think in some ways they have just as much impact. And the smaller one that's been completed is the Waldron Court crossing across Central Avenue. And the 2 that are coming up, it's continuing that model up Central Avenue at 1st Street and at 2nd Street, but then also at Whittier Street. I know you've been working on a design to improve the crossing for the community trail and the parking area that's off Whittier Street for the community trail. Can one of you give a little bit better summary than I just did?
Sure. So I think you're right. There's pedestrian improvements that we're trying to make. We've talked about underground infrastructure, what people don't necessarily see. Right now, we have a couple of projects that are out to bid. We have a reconstruction of the parking area at Woodman Park School with some ADA parking spaces being added, some ADA accessible walkways to make our concessions accessible, to make our ball fields accessible. Similar Sullivan Drive, we're putting some ADA parking spaces there that'll be paved with accessibility built into the playground, into the concessions. The downtown bump out at Waldron Court that was recently constructed is really intended to narrow down the road so it improves pedestrian visibility. That coupled with the new lighting that's been going in downtown. Jill's had a tremendous role in that and helping to put all the pieces together, ordering the lights, ordering the poles, ordering the pole bases, lining up the contractors. All of those things are coming together to just provide a better pedestrian experience and customer experience. The next phase of that, as you mentioned, is the 1st and 2nd Street bump outs, which we had intended originally to put those out last year with the Waldron Court. We had to defer a little bit later, but we're still planning on tackling those. That'll just improve the crossings at those locations.
And hopefully we can see those later this summer, early fall.
That's right. Yeah. And in conjunction with that, we're going to be replacing more of the street lighting downtown as well, continuing that project.
Great. Jill, anything else that the listener needs to know about projects in Dover?
Projects in Dover. Thank you for clarifying.
You're welcome.
No, I don't think so. I mean, as you mentioned, if you go to the City of Dover webpage, there's a list of projects that engineering is working on right now. It's kind of, you kind of have to find your way through it, but, you go to community services, engineering, and there's a list of projects there that we're working on.
I will point out engineering is just one piece of it. We often talk and focus on street reconstructions. A lot of that is below ground. The average person's not going to see that. We do have staff that are focused on facilities in parks and recreation. This year, we're wrapping up the Jenny Thompson pool reconstruction. We're wrapping up the library reconstruction and renovation. We're completely redoing all the tennis courts, basketball courts throughout the city. That's a direct response to a poll, right? A public poll, community survey, where we heard the feedback that the recreation facilities needed some TLC, and we prioritize that, put it into the CIP, and now we're executing that. So this summer, as school starts in the fall, we're going to have brand new courts and recreation facilities. Cool. We've taken a concerted effort to make sure that our baseball fields, our soccer fields are in top-notch shape, by giving them adequate rest and different mowing programs. In fact, our community services staff just installed a new filtration system on the well for Shaw's Lane, so that way we don't have to rely on city drinking water for irrigation anymore. Just little things like that are facilities that people see every day and interact with.
Appreciate you both coming in. Have a great day.
Thanks. You too, Chris.
Thank you.
Bye.
Dover has a wealth of history in its over 400 years of existence. Coming up, Mike Gillis is going to share some of that history with us.
As the nation prepares to mark the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, this week in Dover history, we'll spend the next month looking back at Dover's role during the American Revolution and the year 1776. While the Declaration was signed in Philadelphia, its meaning was felt in communities across the colonies, including Dover. Local residents were called upon to support the cause of independence, serve in the militia, provide supplies, and help shape the new civic life of a nation being born. Over the next several weeks, we'll explore moments from Dover's revolutionary past and consider how events here connected to the larger story of American independence. In the spring of 1776, a piece of parchment arrived in Dover that would permanently alter the fabric of the community. Mandated by the Continental Congress and issued by the New Hampshire Committee of Safety on April 12th, the Association Test was an uncompromising loyalty oath. It demanded that nearly every male inhabitant 21 and older solemnly swear to risk their lives, fortunes, and arms to oppose the hostile proceedings of British fleets and armies. Dover's local Committee of Safety, chaired by the prominent Colonel Thomas Westbrook Waldron, was tasked with the heavy burden of administering this mandate. The test placed the men of Dover in an inescapable position. To sign the document was to officially commit to the revolution, branding oneself a rebel subject to the hangman's noose should the British prevail. Conversely, to refuse was tantamount to treason against the nascent American state, bringing the immediate threat of property confiscation, the loss of civil rights, and complete social ostracism. This stark, militant binary created a profound internal crisis, particularly for the area's robust Quaker population. Bound by deep-seated pacifist beliefs, the Quakers were strictly forbidden from bearing arms. Although many were not inherently opposed to independence and were willing to pay civic taxes, their religious convictions forced them into the perilous role of conscientious objectors. The Association Test offered no nuance, legally categorizing these peaceful dissenters alongside active loyalists. Today, the original physical returns of Dover's Association Test are considered lost to history, an archival tragedy that obscures the exact names of the local dissidents. Nevertheless, the legacy of the 1776 Association Test endures as a dramatic moment when Dover was forced to legally categorize its people, transforming quiet neighbors into declared patriots or suspected enemies on the eve of American independence.
Thanks for listening to the Dover Download this week. If you like what you heard, subscribe through your favorite podcast aggregator. And if you have something you want to hear a topic on, let us know. Finally, this is just one of the many ways we share information about the city of Dover. You can subscribe to the Dover Downloads email newsletter every week or other newsletters that we have by going to the City of Dover homepage, www.dover.nh.gov. Have a great week.